Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, December 31st, 2024. That's it. It's the end. We're done. Bye, everybody. 2024 is over, and this is the last day of it. The end. Okay, so, wasn't a great year, but I don't know. The next one looks worse, but I don't know. What else can we remark on? We'll be, after the next one, we'll be halfway through the 2020s. I don't know what we make of that, but at any rate, I guess creeping ever closer to what looks to be, despite the 14th Amendment and the ruling in Colorado, the inauguration of Donald Trump in about 3 weeks, I guess, from now. And I don't know. Seems to be nothing that anybody can do to stop it except enforce the Constitution. So, oh well. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So we're all left pondering instead. Okay, well, let's catch up on the news of the day. Oh, by the way, everybody should be assured that everything's fine with Greg. I got a note from him about halfway through the show. There was a non-Abby dog-related emergency. No humans were harmed in the making of this emergency, I guess, except for the people who were stressed out trying to take care of the dogs. But I don't think it's a HIPAA violation for me to pass this on. But he did send a note. I didn't see it, of course, until after I was done. But I guess he's dog sitting for a grand dog, I guess you would call it. And dog had an emergency, but everything's fine now. So dog is okay. People are okay. And you don't have to worry about anything. There's nothing for you to worry about except for the fact that it's New Year's Eve and you still don't know what you're doing tonight. And two, Donald Trump apparently going to be president regardless of all the warning signs. Okay. Well, let's see. Oh, I haven't got all of my usual pages open here. So let's make sure we get all of the various inputs coming in, opening up, still checking in every once in a while on Mastodon, not doing so for the most part over at Twitter. But I'm certainly not monitoring what's going on Twitter, although Justice reminds me that there is Twitter drama to be had if you are interested in having it. And I guess the word is that... the word is that Twitter is terrible. But the word for it, I guess, sock puppet, is the one that comes to mind. I guess Elon Musk apparently, and I think he's done this before, and I don't know why people can't really keep track of these things, but Elon Musk maintains a couple of sock puppets, as we used to call them in the old days, and burner accounts is what people call them these days. But a fake account that is actually him that he can use so that he can count on having, moral support, I guess, on Twitter. Someone will always retweet me or tell me what a fantastic statement it was that I just issued. Usually, I think you can probably just rely on the fandom for that. But if not, you can pull out another account and just do that. Adrian Dittman, apparently, I think is the name. That's what Justice was telling me is the name of this burner account that he keeps. And I think the secret got out. I'm sure people probably suspected it just because of the slavish devotion that this Adrian Dittman had for Elon Musk. If he used it a lot, I'm sure he slipped up and gave indications. But I guess this time he was pretending to be this Adrian Dittman in I don't know, was it on the Twitter, like the Twitter, what do they call those? They had, I forget what the terminology was for it because I never used it, but you have like a video, audio, like what Google had as Hangouts. Right, and you could do live streams on, I forget what they were called. It doesn't even matter. The place is falling apart. And he did one, anyway, he claimed to be this Adrian Dittman guy who had mysteriously also a South African accent and sounded something like Elon. I guess he used a voice filter of some kind. Spaces, that's right. Thank you, Justice. You don't have to stay awake to co-produce the show, but I appreciate it. Yeah, Twitter Spaces, exactly right. So I think that's what was going on. I mean, now we know the name of it. I don't know whether I'm right about that, what was going on, but he called in, used a pitch changer of some kind on his voice and pretended to be him, but then lapsed into first person content about Elon Musk as he was going on along the way. So he couldn't keep it straight for the 2 minutes that he was in the Twitter Spaces. But he's a genius. Don't worry about it. He'll fix the economy just fine. Anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting. And so, as Justice was saying, Adrian Dittman is the John Barron of David Denison's. Remember that Donald Trump, the incoming president of the United States, among other things, paints his face orange. Really don't know why that still just doesn't register with everybody is crazy. But somebody who has maintained over the course of years several alter egos, some of which, of course, I think probably the most ridiculous of which was John Barron, who back in the 80s he used to use pretending it was his PR man. Now, Donald Trump was wealthy enough in the 1980s that he could have hired a PR man, but I guess nobody would do his bidding quite the way he wanted it done. So remember, there were recordings of him somewhere, of him calling usually gossip column writers for like the New York Post and stuff like that, right? Cindy Adams and a couple others, but calling and making these various pitches for these wild stories in favor of Donald Trump, usually talking about what fabulous, beautiful women, all the hottest models in New York are being dated by probably the most virile human being in the history of the world, Donald Trump. And it sounded just like him. It made the same stupid, outrageous claims. No, hold on a minute. I'll get Mr. Trump for you. Hold on, just a moment. Mr. Trump. I'm going to muffle my own voice. Come in here and take this telephone call. Very important telephone call from a fantastic writer. All right, thank you, I will. Okay, you're not Donald Trump. Everybody kind of knew it. Apparently, some people were somehow fooled by it. I don't really know why that was the case. David Denison, I think, was actually just a name that he used as a pass-through, a fake person pass-through for the Stormy Daniels payment at some point, at some level. Pretended that the contract for the payoff for Stormy Daniels was with one David Denison, which, it's just crime, and the reason he's doing it is to cover stuff up. With John Barron, it wasn't a crime per se, but it was just, to make it look like there were people who thought he was fabulous. Or interesting, though, like why would a columnist care if Donald Trump paid a guy named John Barron to think that Donald Trump was fabulous? Like, so what? Anyway, but he went ahead and did that, and maybe he's just mentally unstable and doesn't belong in the White House. I don't recall other presidents, for instance. I mean, we're doing all the obits and remembrances of Jimmy Carter. I don't recall him having, like another alter ego who would talk up Jimmy Carter's skill at peanut farming to other Georgians or anything like that, right? But it's really him. I don't know. This guy is really weird. He had this strange Southern accent, and he was like telling me he lusted in his heart, and he was confessing to it. But also, Jimmy Carter was a great peanut farmer and will probably be a good president as well. And the hostage crisis isn't his fault. It was very weird. Anyway, that's how Donald Trump spends his inner life. And so he's now in a position to destroy the country. Okay, so I have seen something being passed around this morning, which I guess doesn't qualify as news because you all know it, but it's yet another opinion piece on how bad it's likely to be with Donald Trump in charge. And it was making an interesting one-off point that a lot of people were finding it easy to agree with, which was that Trump was looking to impose, or I think it was Brendan Nyhan who I think distilled out the quote that was most to the point, at least in his view, on this piece. We'll read the piece and see whether we agree with Brendan's assessment here. The quote he pulled out was from this piece: Trump aims not to streamline modern state bureaucracies, right? That would be sane washing. what he's trying to do here, either with Project 2025 or Doge, right? He's not looking to streamline modern bureaucracy. Rather, he's looking to replace them with a much older form. Now, he's looking to replace them, right? What's his name? Steve Bannon is always saying, destroy the administrative state. And we'll rebuild something better. I mean, it will still be an administrative state, but we'll build something better. And he's saying here, we're not looking to invent something new and replace the old bureaucracy with this new form, but rather what he's looking to do is bring back a much older form of rule based on personal loyalty to the ruler, which, we got rid of many, many moons ago because it's subject to such corruption and it doesn't make any sense in light of Enlightenment thought in general. Like everything from the late 1600s on tells us, it's probably better if there's some participatory democracy, some representation, and less reliance on magic for justifying rules. Yeah, divine right, or just whatever it is, the dictatorship model where it's not all left in one set of hands. There's some accountability, there's some participation, there's some representation, but apparently that's all out. It's just a weird idea that, he is kind of, and other people were expanding on this. I saw others commenting on it. Yeah, it's really like he's a 19th century, or did they say 18th century? I don't know which one, but somebody trying to drag us back to the 19th century, up to not just the weird policy, but also the structure of the government, which is something we largely gave up on a long time ago. I mean, if you remember from your American history schooling, likely in high school or something, the idea of the spoils system, which was or should have been presented at the time as hopelessly vulnerable, let's say, at least to corruption, and that had been replaced by, if not exactly a meritocracy, then certainly something more open and stable than having a president sweep out an entire bureaucracy and replace them with loyal flunkies later on, and doing so on a political basis, as a reward for political support. I very clearly recall being told, that was actually a very bad idea, and it's been a very good reform that we've put in place since, and it's been assumed as the baseline form of governance in the United States since, the 1890s, 1910s. I don't know. Maybe a little bit later. It was refined over the years, but certainly post-World War II, the bureaucracy, as much as it has exploded in growth, and maybe it was the explosion in growth that necessitated this, there was no way to, to maintain the spoils system with so many more people on the payroll and enforce any kind of usable litmus test. Anyway, the real thoughts on this come from this opinion guest essay in the New York Times. Americans love to hate the state, but do they really want this? Is the question posed by Stephen E. Hansen and Jeffrey S. Kopstein. Who are they? Mr. Hansen and Mr. Kopstein are the authors of The Assault on the State: How the Global Attack on Modern Government Endangers Our Future. A very lofty pursuit, but let's focus on what's going on here in the United States. Because this is where they're writing. President-elect Donald Trump's picks for many of the top cabinet positions in his upcoming administration are unorthodox, to say the least. In some cases, it would be hard to think of people less qualified for their proposed jobs. I feel confident he could do that, but it would be hard. For most of us, we don't know or like to acknowledge knowing people worse than, say, Pete Hegseth. But they exist. And in fact, Pete Hegseth is an example here. Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, Kash Patel as FBI Director, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as overseer of the nation's healthcare policies. Each lacks the relevant experience and has an array of troubling biases that should be disqualifying. Mr. Trump's choices for ambassadors and senior advisors, sycophants, cronies, and even his children's in-laws, there we are, and romantic partners seem to break with a century of precedent in American policies. Yes, romantic partners there, I guess, is the way they're dealing with the Kim Guilfoyle breakup, I suppose, now that she's been appointed ambassador to Greece. Who knew? Anyway, yes, and children's in-laws. That's Machetenister, right? Is that that the Yiddish for it? I think so. Anyway, Mr. Trump's choices for ambassadors and senior advisors includes all those wackadoodles and hangers-on. What we are seeing in the United States today, though, is not so new. Right? It's not some new innovation that Donald Trump has come up with, even though, I don't know, has he even bothered trying to sell it as new? I guess not. Wow, he's honest. It echoes what is happening all over the world, for one thing. An assault on the modern state as we know it. In countries including Hungary, Israel, and Britain, the civil service, judiciary, and law enforcement have been attacked by the very leaders elected to manage them. We have seen the sort of damage these types of attacks cause. They enrich loyalists, weaken independent sources of expertise and information, and erode vital public services. They will do much the same here. Eviscerating modern state institutions almost always clears a path for a different type of political order. That's usually the point, right? But one of the ones it clears the way for is one built on personal loyalties and connections to the ruler. The German sociologist Max Weber, I guess Weber, what is it? It's Weber for you and me, but how do you say it in German? I'll ask Max. Well, he had a word for this type of regime, patrimonialism. All right, be on the lookout for that. Based, of course, on the arbitrary rule of leaders who viewed themselves as traditional fathers of their nations and who run the state as a family business of sorts, staffed by relatives, friends, and other members of the ruler's extended household. And we do see that even in the modern era. I mean, Saudi Arabia is a pretty good example. But I don't know, what came to mind first was Iraq under Saddam Hussein, with like Uday and Qusay holding official positions in the government as well as being, mini dictators of their own. But of course, maybe a better example is Saudi Arabia and the Arab Emirate states where, members of the royal family, the extended royal family, occupy all of the government ministries, etc. Social scientists thought that patrimonialism had been relegated to the dustbin of history, except for Saudi Arabia, which kind of still lives there, and for good reason. Such regimes couldn't compete militarily or economically with states led by the expert civil service that helped make modern societies rich, powerful, and relatively secure. Like, those are good things. Why are we throwing them away? That's the point. But a slew of self-aggrandizing leaders has taken advantage of rising inequality, cultural conflicts, and changing demography to grab power. The result has been a steep decline in the government's ability to provide essential services, such as healthcare, education, and safety. Oh no, right? Bad news. Compared with the weak feudal states that preceded them, patrimonial regimes such as the Dutch Empire in the 17th century and Tsarist Russia in the 18th and 19th centuries were good at extracting revenue and making war, but otherwise inept. They were capable of coercion, but they could not provide the predictable enforcement of laws essential to modern capitalism. And again, that's probably a good place to repeat and emphasize that the essential to the success of modern capitalism, which you would think Donald Trump and Elon Musk would be interested in preserving because it's made them, it's made them wealthy. I think it's made Donald Trump wealthy. I mean, sort of. But then I guess if you really take a closer look at what made Donald Trump wealthy, it's fraud and crime. And you don't really need a stable, in fact, it would be better if you had an unstable law enforcement regime if you wanted to get away with continued fraud and crime. But maybe Elon Musk might think that. But then again, we are talking about somebody with so much money and so much power as a result of the money that he can manipulate the legal regime as necessary. But in day-to-day activity and for most businesses, stability and predictably enforceable laws are the engine that makes capitalism go. You can invest in something because you know that, well, for one thing, you know that the law favors capital, and if something goes wrong or something goes right and there are profits to be had, but there's some dispute over the distribution of the profits, the system will protect the capital first, and, you know, private property rights and capital rights and contracting rights, and you can pretty much predict how the money will be distributed, and that's the sort of thing that gives you the confidence to risk your capital in these investments. That's how the engine works. But if it's a recognized right that the dictatorial ruler can just claim a portion of the profits for himself, and you don't know what the portion is, he just names it as the time comes, you're going to be a little less enthusiastic, let's say, about investing in something, anything. And the system that was making you money is beginning to break down. But for the monarch or the dictatorial leader who can just stand around and whenever he sees a pile of money, grab the whole thing or a portion of it, I guess it's no skin off his nose. But everybody else will be looking for a more stable environment in which to invest. Anyway, the arbitrary decision-making that is typical of patrimonialism sometimes even resulted in the disintegration of the state itself. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia could decide in the middle of World War I to take over direct command of Russian troops, for instance, leaving his capital city in the hands of his wife and her confidant, the faith healer Grigory Rasputin, which, in hindsight, when you put it that way, it didn't have to be hindsight, really. But yeah, I guess you're involved in the first modern global conflict, even if it wasn't entirely global, but yeah, okay. Do you want expertly trained generals? You have a corps of commanders who have gone through the military academy, et cetera, who should take command of the troops, or, whoever's around the house will take care of things. Yeah, you could see how that might lead to collapse. Within a year and a half, the Russian Empire did, in fact, collapse in defeat and revolution, leaving a power vacuum that was ultimately filled by Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik Party. Americans love to hate their state. About half of the citizenry now believes that there really is a deep state of shadowy power brokers who pull the strings of our government behind the scenes. That's a problem in its own right. But as annoying and inefficient as bureaucracies sometimes are, all of us depend on them to live what we now consider normal lives. And that's really the underlying point here. Government agencies with staff who are recruited by merit, or something quite like it, play a vital role ensuring the safety of our food, air, and water, maintaining the value of our currency. Do you think that might be important? Bitcoin weirdos don't, but we do. And what about safety of food, air, and water? I think so also, but again, Bitcoin weirdos probably, among other people, feel that it's not that important because Bitcoin weirdos think they're going to become billionaires tomorrow, and I'll just use my billions of dollars to buy safe stuff. Whereas all the rest of you having to rely on cheap stuff will probably get the dangerous stuff. But there's no guarantee of that, for one thing. And, if there's no system of law, again, now you're back at the problem of why aren't my guards killing me? Anyway, that's not where we meant to go with this. But other examples of the way this can disrupt your life. You can, government agencies with competent staff, right, ensure safety of food, air, and water, maintain the value of our currency, resolve legal disputes peacefully. You don't have to just kill the guy you're guarding. And defending our national security. We rarely pay attention to the everyday work of government bureaucrats, but without them, we would be in grave danger, right? So for every time you say, I don't understand why they're not processing my Medicare properly, that you have a valid complaint. But at the same time, Is there safe food on the shelves? Yes, but that's bureaucracy is doing that. Is there, a limitation on what can be burned to generate electricity? Yes, you can't just burn mercury and garbage and kill everybody in the neighborhood. Why not? Bureaucracy. Same bureaucracy that might have screwed up your Medicare application, but bureaucracy nonetheless. There's good and there's bad. Anyway, when Mr. Trump and his cronies declare that they will destroy the deep state, which doesn't even exist, and so who cares, it's really the modern state, the state that supports the foundations of both public and private life that they have in mind. Why would you have that in mind? Maybe you're hopelessly stupid. I don't know. Once we view the matter from this perspective, it's much easier to understand why Mr. Trump invited Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to drastically downsize the American state. In reality, though, government will not be downsized. It will be repurposed. And that's a good point. And of course, he can just say it was downsized, and his people will believe it. In reality, government will not be downsized. It will be repurposed. Like Russia's Vladimir Putin, Hungary's Viktor Orban, and Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu, Mr. Trump aims not to streamline modern state bureaucracies, but rather to replace them with a much older form of rule based on personal loyalty to the ruler. And we'll just read a little bit more as we exit over the music. Hungary and Israel provide a glimpse into our future. Mr. Orban built his family a palace rivaling Versailles while he attacked Hungary's educational and healthcare systems. That seems wrong. And his friends became fabulously wealthy as they took advantage of their connections to the leader. Mr. Netanyahu worked to weaken the Israeli civil service and judiciary to stave off corruption charges and reward loyalists. And, of course, things went south after October 7th. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on, and we'll read a little bit more from this piece that was outlining the fact that, or the, I guess it's opinion, but it's pretty damn close to fact, that if you take a look, that's one of Trump's favorite verbal crutches. If you take a look at this, if it's usually when he doesn't know what he's talking about, if you just take a look at this, just take a look at this and this and this, then you'll see that other thing that I said that was crazy actually makes sense, which it doesn't. But where were we with this? Examples from around the world, Israel and Hungary in particular, about dismantling the administrative state and replacing it with a state staffed with personal loyalists. Where in Israel, Netanyahu worked to weaken the Israeli civil service and judiciary. I certainly remember the judiciary restructuring, to stave off corruption charges and reward loyalists. And after Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, 2023, some government ministries were left paralyzed for days. Israel's civil society filled the void. And also not good, and a good parallel maybe to the Russian situation, in that, as it turns out, if you find yourself in a crisis situation where you need competent leadership, whether it be military or civilian, and there is none, problems are exacerbated, and it could lead to your collapse. The occasional defeat of patrimonial leaders in democratic elections has not halted these dangerous global trends. Mr. Trump's return to the White House isn't the only example. In Poland, where the patrimonial administration of, Jaroslaw Kaczynski, maybe? It's Polish, but that's my best shot, was unexpectedly defeated in a parliamentary vote by Donald Tusk, and that's not a Matrix glitch, that's the actual name of the guy in Poland, Donald Tusk. Okay. I don't know whether they say Tusk or something like that, but that's the way it's spelled. Making it for an easier stab at the pronunciation anyway, even if we got it wrong. But his pro-European Union party, Civic Platform, in 2023, I guess, was the example here. I'll have to read through it again. So who comes out on top? In Poland, the patrimonial administration of Kaczynski, unexpectedly defeated in a parliamentary vote by Tusk's pro-European Union party, Civic Platform. That's the name of the party in 2023. And it has proved to be an extraordinarily difficult thing to repair the damage already done to state agencies and the judiciary. And that too, a hallmark of Republican policymaking is that they tend to say, Democrats and Republicans may have different ideas about how to get to the same ends, but we're all on the same page. We all want to improve things in America, yada, yada, yada. Now, that used to be true. And now, of course, Donald Trump just says the place is a hellhole and we got to wreck the whole thing. But one of the hallmarks of Republican policy, as long as I can remember, certainly since Reagan, but just yesterday we were talking about how everybody always says, oh no, Nixon was doing the same thing too, and so was McKinley. But hallmark of Republican administration has been to say that there's a policy dispute between Democrats and Republicans, and Republicans have won the election, we're going to try things the Republican way, but the Republican way tends to include burning down the bridge afterwards, right? Like, we want to reform education. Okay, fine. Everybody wants to improve education. What's your solution? We are going to bankrupt public schools, use the money to build up private schools, and then let public education collapse to the point where it's virtually useless, so that even if it turns out that the voucher system that we've put in place to boost the private school system doesn't work, and the private school system either collapses or is inaccessible to, the vast majority of Americans, there's no going back. You don't have the resources to rebuild the public education system from the ground up, and that's what you'll have to do because it was left to rot and collapsed through atrophy. It wasn't, maintained as a competitor to the private school system for Americans to make their choices about who they think does a better job and make a consumer choice about where to go. One was destroyed and one was built up. And if you don't like the one we built up, well, you're free to build a new one somewhere else if you can win the election. That's sort of what they do. And here they're reminding us that it has, in Poland, proved to be extraordinarily difficult to repair the damage already done to state agencies and the judiciary, even if you win your election. And if Mr. Putin manages to replace Ukraine's independent constitutional regime with a Russian client state, the ultimate goal of his brutal invasion, as they say, the fragile balance of power in Europe may tip decisively toward patrimonialism. To reverse the global assault on modern government then will require a more than a simple defense of democracy, as they put it. After all, Mr. Trump won the presidential election fairly, we think. I had to add that part. The threat we face is different and perhaps even more critical. A world in which the rule of law has given way entirely to the rule of men, and the worst possible man. Sometimes, I guess you could imagine handing things over to the rule of men. If you happen to have the right one, maybe it works, but it probably doesn't work out all that well all that often. The odds are against you, and in this case, they're stacked. So anyway, but I thought that was a good point and a good jumping off point for discussion. You'll find it on Blue Sky. Jamel Bowie is involved. Hilzoy remains involved in the discussion as well on Blue Sky. Everybody has got something to say about this, and pointing out it is interesting that it's counterintuitive, I think, even to MAGA fans, about the idea of dragging America backward for something like this, and to say we're going to reinstate a system that was discredited 150 years ago, and I don't know, just see what happens, I guess. Except, well, one of the things that can happen is robber barons can plunder the whole thing. But that was actually the plan, because that's who Trump is, or that's who he wishes he was anyway. And he's certainly been doing the plundering part of it. So, and he's gotten away with it too. So I guess he'll continue on. Meanwhile, elsewhere around the world where they're struggling with various problems of their own, I just wanted to check back in on the good folks of South Korea, because their problems continue. And in fact, in the space we've left in the program in covering South Korean matters since the last time we discussed them, they have, I guess, technically impeached a second president. It's, a rotating cast of the same people, and it's really a matter of having impeached the president, and then you got to have an acting president. And nobody wanted to, have an acting president. It was from the party of the original president, and everybody was up in arms. And so, anyway, they ended up impeaching the acting president as well. Although, I guess it's not quite the same. Once you've impeached one, just keep going. Impeach the whole bunch of them. It didn't change the situation very much, but just for the record, they've impeached 2 presidents in like a month. So, South Korea's court, the highest court, has approved now the arrest of President Yoon as part of the investigation into his declaration of martial law, which I still haven't really seen explained all that well. I stopped looking, but I haven't seen it explained very well in Western American, really, press. But the explanation we got, that purported to be the case from the Korean sources, that says that, Yoon was pretty much, he and his party, kind of poisoned by online YouTube and TikTok algorithms into believing the same crazy nonsense that our MAGA and QAnon weirdos believe in, except he was president and he just executed public policy based on that lunacy. It's one of the problems with patrimonialism, I guess. If you can be the dictator of what goes, what you say goes, and if you are inclined to say crazy stuff, then that's one of the chief benefits of even if it's not purely or doesn't do a very good job as being meritocracy, but a diffuse the diffusion of power among a diverse bureaucracy and large bureaucracy is it's slow moving and everybody hates that, but it's a pretty good, usually pretty efficient bulwark against the kind of mistake that this sort of patrimonialism can lead to. If one guy, all it takes is one guy to give the thumbs up, the odds go through the roof that he'll give the thumbs up to something very stupid and baseless, because especially if you're a Donald Trump type and you saw it on YouTube. I saw it on television, and so that's what the policy is going to be. It doesn't really work very well. But Reuters reports South Korea court approves arrest of President Yoon in martial law investigation by Josh Smith and Joyce Lee. Just to get that on the record, I mean, I skimmed the article and it doesn't really do much good clarifying the situation for people who don't understand South Korean politics, like me. I'm like, all right, they have an arrest warrant. That sounds good. That we don't do that here, but they do that there. Okay. Well, only under extraordinary circumstances. Okay, good. And And then it mentions, oh, by the way, there was another impeachment along the way. A South Korean court gave authorities approval on Tuesday to detain impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol in a criminal investigation into his martial law decree, marking the first time that a sitting president of the country has faced arrest. That would be a first for us, too. The Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials, known as the CIO, Corruption Investigation Office, confirmed the Seoul Western District Court approved an arrest warrant. Okay, they confirmed that the court approved the arrest warrant requested by investigators examining Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law. Yoon, who has been suspended from office, is facing investigation on allegations that he was the leader of an insurrection. Sounds familiar. One of the few criminal charges from which a South Korean president does not have immunity. That was supposed to be the case here in the United States, but we invented a way around it for one guy. Anyway, I mean, we haven't tested it to see whether another guy could use it. Maybe another Republican could use it, but I don't think anybody really believes that this court would allow a Democrat to use it. Anyway, separately, Yoon's trial on impeachment is being heard at the Constitutional Court. The arrest warrant for an incumbent president is unprecedented and deepens the political crisis that has engulfed South Korea, Asia's fourth largest economy and a key U.S. ally. Okay, although as I read this again, the arrest warrant for an incumbent president, didn't I say, that he had been impeached? Yes, but I guess he has not yet been removed from office. Impeached, right? Just like here in the United States. He's been impeached, and I guess there's someone else as acting president. He's suspended from power pending the outcome of his trial, which I guess is a little different than we do it here in the United States. And the acting president has likewise been impeached. Not certain whether he too has been suspended from exercising power and they're on to their third president in like 2 weeks. But okay, so that makes more sense now. The arrest warrant for an incumbent president. He's still an incumbent president. He just can't exercise any power. Okay. Prime Minister Han Duk-soo, who took over from Yoon as acting president, has also been impeached by Parliament, which is dominated by the opposition party. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, who took over as acting president after Han's impeachment, has been dealing with Sunday's crash of Jeju, do they say it that way, air flight, doesn't really matter what the number of the flight was. They number them a little bit differently. Jeju Air Flight 7C2216. But you likely heard this story. It was a terrible weekend for aviation. We had the Azerbaijani airliner shot down by Russians. This Korean plane crashed. There was some incident in Halifax, Nova Scotia that thankfully didn't result in a tragedy. But yeah, this crash too caught on video and circulating on social media. Wow. The 179 people killed in this, by the way, at the time of writing anyway, in the deadliest air disaster on South Korean soil. The current arrest warrant is viable until January 6th, interestingly enough, and gives investigators only 48 hours to hold Yoon after he is arrested. So, I mean, it's not like they arrest the guy and throw away the key. He's got a booking and 48 hours for them to, I don't know what, figure out what's going on. But not indefinite detention. That seems like a good check on the power. Investigators must then decide whether to request a detention warrant and keep him in prison while they keep going, or release him at that point. Once arrested, Yoon is expected to be held at the Seoul Detention Center, Yonhap News Agency said, citing the CIO. Yoon Kab-kyun, a lawyer for the impeached president, said the arrest warrant was illegal and invalid because the CIO did not have the authority under South Korean law to request a warrant. So some interesting technicalities. We'll see where they get with that. He said the president's legal team will file an injunction at the Constitutional Court to stop the warrant. Hundreds of Yoon's supporters gathered outside his residence on Tuesday to protest against the warrant, some tussling with police. The district court issued a warrant due to the likelihood that Yoon will not respond to summons without a justifiable reason, and there being a substantial reason to suspect Yoon of a crime, Yonhap said. The court declined to comment. Well, that is interesting. Due process in South Korea is described next. It was unclear on how the arrest warrant for Yoon will be carried out. South Korea's Presidential Security Service said in a statement on Tuesday that it will treat the arrest warrant according to due process, but I'm not sure what that's going to mean there. The court also approved a search warrant for Yoon's residence, the CIO said. Previously, police have tried but failed to raid the presidential office as part of the investigation due to the Presidential Security Service blocking access. So far, prosecutors have indicted 3 top defense officials in connection with Yoon's martial law. Former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, whose trial will hold its first hearing on January 16th, as well as Yao In-hyung, Chief of Defense Counterintelligence Command, and Lee Jin-woo, Commander of the Capital Defense Command, have also been indicted, with more expected to follow. Investigators raided the Army's counterintelligence offices on Tuesday as part of their probe. Choi called for national harmony and unity. Sure, why not? And for trust in the government in a New Year's address on Tuesday, saying the country is in an unprecedentedly serious situation. Yeah, so then it goes on to describe the short-lived martial law, but doesn't go into the reasons why it was declared, which is what I would really be interested in at this point. Anyway, we'll stop there just because, well, we're not learning a great deal necessarily about the ins and outs of South Korean government model, but it is pretty interesting to see how other countries handle a similar situation, and it is a little bit tough to watch them impeaching presidents with abandon like this and arresting sitting presidents. And, well, I don't know. I don't know if anybody wants to point to South Korea and say, see, we could be doing that. But they are surviving. And so far, it looks like regular, everyday, day-to-day life continues as usual there, though I can imagine there's some stress and tension about it as well. All right, let's see. Other things that might be of importance that we might want to squeeze in, say, in the next 10 minutes or so. We can switch gears in the second hour. There's a story I meant to bring to you yesterday, but gosh, there's just so much. But while we're on foreign affairs, the New York Times has finally helped us out a little bit, chiming in on the situation in Finland, in the Baltic Sea, and about Russia's shadow fleet. I mentioned them the other day in the Finland-Estonia story, and it wasn't entirely clear what this shadow fleet was all about. The New York Times has picked up on that. Has Russia's shadow fleet, built to evade sanctions, added sabotage to its list? That's certainly the accusation. And, I mean, the answer seems pretty clear. Yes, but we're going through due process stuff even with this and trying to figure things out. We have a set of circumstantial evidence. This electricity went out between Finland and Estonia at exactly such and such a time. Satellite imagery and other things, tracking, gives us the location of the ship in question as being, well, directly over that cable that carries that electricity at that time. And then finally, the circumstantial evidence of, well, this ship was dragging its anchor apparently for hundreds of kilometers as well. And what other evidence is there? Well, the Baltic Sea, as it turns out, is not particularly deep. So they're able to go to the seabed and take a look and say, look at this. It's the mark made along the seabed from this anchor that was being dragged. It's very long, and it leads to the current location of this ship. And those things taken together lead us to believe that the dragged anchor was what damaged the cable and cut off electricity. Now it's a question of, why did they do it? Was it done on purpose? And what circumstantial evidence can we put together to prove that? Absent a confession, then I don't know. I guess it's all circumstantial evidence, which, again, a reminder, that's not bad evidence. It's just not direct evidence. Anyway, has Russia's shadow fleet, which was built to evade sanctions, and let's find out about that, added sabotage to its list? We don't know, but we'll find out from this article. Russia has assembled a fleet of hundreds of vessels to covertly ship its oil. That's what the shadow fleet was originally about. Now, with so many ships at sea, the idea of using some to cause havoc may be proving irresistible to the Kremlin, and that's probably the best explanation for, well, how and why did they move on to sabotage? Why do we suspect that that's the case? And it may just be, well, when you give a toy like that to someone like Vladimir Putin, that's what he does with it. Michael Schwirtz, not Schwartz, but Schwirtz, Schwirtz, is the reporter for the New York Times on this one. Let's see what we can get done before we take our top-of-the-hour break. Western officials have long been concerned about Moscow's so-called shadow fleet, an assemblage of aged tankers created to covertly carry Russian crude oil around the world. That's what this is really about at bottom. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, the worry primarily concerned the use of such off-the-books ships to circumvent Western sanctions and generate revenue to fuel the Kremlin's war machine. But Russia's shadow fleet may now present a more pressing danger to the West. This week, Finnish commandos boarded an oil tanker that officials suspect, that's all they can say, had cut through vital underwater cables in the Baltic Sea, including one that carries electricity between Finland and Estonia. And I guess that's another good point. One of the reasons this is possible by dragging your anchor. I mean, anchor chains are only so long. They're pretty long, but I mean, to drag an anchor across the bottom of the ocean and just hook and destroy every cable you pass over requires, that the cable be not all that deep. And I guess that's the case in the Baltic, in case you hadn't given it any thought. Anyway, the ship, the Eagle S, bears all the hallmarks of vessels belonging to Russia's shadow fleet. It's all circumstantial evidence as well. Officials said it had embarked from a Russian port shortly before the cables were cut. If confirmed, it would be the first known instance of a shadow fleet vessel being used to intentionally sabotage critical infrastructure in Europe. They used to just use their own vessels, I guess. And officials and experts said a clear escalation by Russia in its conflict with the West. We know about Russia's shadow fleet operating in our area, and we know Russia is systematically conducting hybrid warfare against its neighboring NATO and EU countries, said, an Estonian name. Now, Estonia's Interior Minister, Lauri Lannmets, as my best Americanized guess at this one, Lauri Lannmets. Interior Minister, once again, of Estonia, and this in an email to the New York Times. It's time to drop the illusions and face it, says this Estonian official. On Friday, a number of countries in the region announced the deployment of an additional naval and coast guard resources to bolster security. NATO's General Secretary Mark Rutte, he's Danish, I believe, or Dutch, I think. Mark Rutte, R-U-T-T-E, responding to requests from the leaders of Finland and Estonia, both member nations, said the Atlantic Alliance would enhance its military presence in the Baltic Sea. Not city, but sea. Any one of those cities would do as well. NATO stands in solidarity with allies, that's the point of it, of course, and condemns any attacks on critical infrastructure, Mr. Rutte said in an earlier post on X, the social media platform, in case you didn't know what it was. For the Kremlin, the creation of a shadow fleet offered a solution to the problem of financing its war in Ukraine. After President Vladimir Putin ordered Russian troops to invade in February of 2022, Western countries began to impose sanctions meant to strangle the Russian economy and cut off its access to the funds needed to keep the country's army on the move. Oil is a cornerstone of Russia's economy, and a key target of the sanctions was Russia's energy sector. But instead of a full embargo, which officials feared would cause a global spike in prices, the United States and its Western allies imposed price caps of $60 a barrel on all oil and oil products originating in Russia and transported by sea, a significant discount on the market price. That does sound like it actually isn't going to cut off the supply at all, but rather encourage people to buy Russian oil. The idea to create a shadow fleet to circumvent sanctions is not new. The scheme has long been used by global pariahs like Iran and North Korea, as well as drug cartels. Wow, said Elizabeth Braw, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council who has researched and written about shadow fleets. I guess the opposite of a shadow fleet, what came to mind for me was reflagging Kuwaiti oil tankers in the 1980s as American ships to unshadow them. I mean, they weren't really shadow anything anyway, but to give them an even higher profile and make them appear to be more directly traceable. Who would be offended if they were shot at? America. So don't do it. But anyway, in this case, they're trying to hide ownership or park it in some third-party country so that it's not pinned on Russia. Russia's innovation, Ms. Braw said in an interview, was, even with this old system, one of scale. Since Russia began assembling its fleet, the number of shadow vessels traversing the oceans has grown by hundreds and now makes up 17% of the total global oil tanker fleet. So it maybe sounds like the sanctions aren't working all that well. That makes it like a tumor, she said. Now, it's not a tumor, but it's like a tumor. And I didn't bring out the Arnold Schwarzenegger for that one, but whenever you're talking about something not being a tumor, you have to do it that way. Anyway, when it was a small share, that is a small share of the oil shipping fleet out there, it could be managed. But now that it's approaching 20% of the total global oil tanker fleet, it's much less manageable, and obviously it's growing. And of course, the mission appears to have changed as well. Nearly 70% of Russia's oil is being transported by shadow tankers. This according to an analysis published in October by the Kyiv School of Economics Institute. Maybe they have an interest in this. A research organization based in Ukraine, of course. Some experts put the total number of Russia's shadow vessels at more than 1,000. Though significantly fewer are used by Russia to regularly circumvent sanctions, the Institute's analysis found. What are the rest of them doing floating around? Well, apparently one of the things they're occupying their time with is sabotage, though the Eagle S was also carrying a full load. All right, welcome back now, and let's continue on, even without telling you what you're being welcomed back to. I don't know, for some reason I skipped that part, but you know where you are. It's a podcast. You figured it out when you started. The authorities in Finland are still investigating whether the Eagle S engaged in a criminal act. Now, we just forgot we were dragging our anchor. Can you prove that's not the case? But the sheer size of the shadow fleet might have made using some of these vessels for sabotage irresistible to Russia, Ms. Braw said. I think at some point that Russia realized, we have all these vessels that we're using. I mean, I feel like it maybe came out in different language, but that's her example. We have all these vessels that we're using. We might as well use a few of them to cause a little extra harm. And I guess everybody can imagine that sort of thing occurring to Vladimir Putin because we have a pretty negative idea of him. But it's an interesting innovation, I guess, right? We have all of these ships. What are the ships for? They are oil tankers, all right? Are they carrying oil? No, not at the moment. Well, this one was. Well, what else should we, have them do? To me, I'd be like, let's fill them with more oil and do that, right? Well, there's not any of oil available. Well, then give the guys the day off. I mean, I don't know. What else should I use the ship for? A ship carries things. That's what it's for. Well, is there some way we could use them to damage people we don't like? No, they're ships. What am I going to do? Drive a boat into somebody else's boat? I don't know. We could go around ramming other boats, I guess. That seems counterproductive because then we don't have our boat. I don't know, but some innovative thinking, I guess. I don't know if this necessarily leads to anything. I do think they're carrying out this sabotage. I guess the explanation of it is we like to do sabotage to people. I don't know that it was motivated by, look how many boats I have. I should make some boat sabotage. I think they just, it doesn't matter really what the provenance of the thing was. But I guess the point is they have these resources and they love doing sabotage. So they didn't really have to do much thinking in to come up with something new. But okay, this is a good explanation if you're, I guess, just coming to it out of nowhere. While it's still not certain that this week's cable cutting was done intentionally, the Baltic Sea, for a number of reasons, is an ideal arena to carry out sabotage operations. Well, no wonder. It is relatively shallow and is crisscrossed with essential undersea cables and pipelines that provide energy as well as internet and phone services to a number of European countries that are NATO members. Russia has relatively unfettered access to the sea from several ports, and its commercial vessels, protected by international maritime law, can move around international waters largely unmolested. Even before the cables were cut, it was clear that the Baltic Sea was becoming a key arena in an intensifying competition between the West and Russia. Since the Ukraine war began, NATO, which the Kremlin considers its primary enemy, has grown by 2 members, Sweden and Finland, both significant Baltic powers. NATO jets in the region are often scrambled to respond to Russian military aircraft, and each fall, countries in the Western Alliance hold major naval exercises there called freezing winds, directed mainly against the Russian threat, the Jade Helm of the Baltic Sea, if you will. Months after the war in Ukraine began, explosions blew apart several sections of the Nord Stream pipeline beneath the Baltic, cutting off Western Europe from Russian natural gas deliveries. U.S. intelligence services have assessed that a pro-Ukrainian group carried out the attack, but public details remain sparse. The suspicions that Russia was using shadow vessels for more than just escaping sanctions existed before this week's cable cutting. Last April, the head of Sweden's Navy told a local news outlet there that there was evidence that such ships were being used to conduct signals intelligence on behalf of Russia, and that some fishing vessels had been spotted with antennas and masts not normally seen on commercial vessels. That seems like a more obvious use of your shadow fleet. If you're not carrying oil, or you're not designed to carry oil because you're a fishing vessel, well, maybe since you can sail around there, maybe you drift a little closer to the territorial waters or even into the territorial waters of one of these NATO nations and see what you can intercept. I mean, it might just be at random, but I think it would be easier to imagine them coming up with than the anchor dragging idea. But they clearly did come up with the anchor dragging idea. So that one is just, it's wrong and bad and causes a lot of damage, but it's sort of evil genius, I guess. Since the war began, there's been an uptick also in suspicious episodes resulting in damage to other critical undersea infrastructure. Last year, a Hong Kong registered ship, this is what it's called, the New Polar Bear. And I don't know whether new here is one word, N-E-W. And I don't know whether it's just new, the word new smashed together, it's extremely new, or whether new is an anglicized version of something that means something in Chinese. But the New Polar Bear, registered in Hong Kong, apparently dropped its anchor and cut through a gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia. What do you know? The ship was allowed to sail into international waters before the authorities could investigate. Officials responded more aggressively last month, halting a Chinese-flagged ship called the Yipeng 3, holding it at anchor for nearly a month, and eventually boarding it after 2 fiber optic cables in the Baltic Sea were cut. All right, so why would Chinese ships be doing this? Is it harder to believe that they would be cutting those cables on Russia's behalf? But on the other hand, isn't it easy enough to believe that the Chinese are cutting it because, hell, why not cut cables from a NATO country? They may have their own interests in doing it. It may have been a favor to Putin. They may have understood that Putin would view it favorably and there was no agreement, but apparently it happened. The legal job, I guess, is to find out why. With the Eagle S, the response has been even more aggressive. Hours after Finland's energy grid operator alerted the police that an undersea power cable was damaged on Wednesday, Finnish officers descended by helicopter to the ship's deck and took over the bridge, preventing the vessel from sailing farther. By Friday, it remained at anchor in the Gulf of Finland, guarded by a Finnish Defense Forces missile boat and a border guard patrol vessel. One reason for the intensity of the response might be that the ship so closely fits the characteristics of a Russian shadow vessel. Right? Remember, ultimately, they can't even demonstrate very clearly straight out for everybody, prove it in a court of law level of work, to prove that the Eagle S is one of these shadow ships. I mean, Russia's going to deny the whole thing. I don't even know whether Russia would acknowledge having a shadow fleet. If they did, it wouldn't be very shadowy, much less acknowledging the membership of any individual vessel in this shadow fleet. They just deny the whole thing. So anyway, one reason for the intensity, of course, here is that the ship so closely fits the characteristics of what we think would be a Russian shadow vessel. The 70,000-ton crude oil tanker has changed ownership and managers within the past 2 years. I guess that's one telltale sign. And lacks the types of insurance that oil tankers usually have. All major indicators of a shadow vessel, said, another one, a Ukrainian name here this time, Yulia Pavitska. My best guess at that one. Yulia Pavitska, manager of the sanctions program at the Kyiv School of Economics Institute, who works with Western officials to identify and impose sanctions on Russian shadow vessels. Right? How do you know it's a Russian shadow vessel? I don't. I know nothing about it. We depend, I guess, on people like Yulia to tell us this matches the characteristics. But, I mean, do I know what the characteristics are? They told me these. I don't know. Are they interested in identifying these people correctly? Yeah, you would think. The ship is also flagged to the Cook Islands, which is well known for its lax oversight. I mean, among people who, I guess, keep track of these things. An inspection of the Eagle S in Ghana in September 2023 discovered 24 defects. Is that bad? Including problems with fire safety and navigation systems. An astounding number, we are told. That's Ms. Pavitska says. That 24 is astounding. I mean, I guess I'll take her word for it. It sounds bad. This is like a record, she said. I can't recollect whether we've seen so many deficiencies identified. So I guess so. A record number of deficiencies, and yet it's sailing around the world. I don't know whether Ghana had the power to stop them and demand that they do anything, but it actually brought to mind the ship that ended up smashing and taking down the Key Bridge in Baltimore, which we're now paying billions to reconstruct, of course, and which stopped commercial traffic in one of the East Coast's busiest and most important ports for quite some time. No one has indicated any belief that that's any sort of Russian shadow vehicle, and it sounds for all the world like an accident, but isn't that kind of what they were hoping everybody would think dragging the anchor was? I mean, have we looked into this? I assume that the intelligence community has, and sometimes you just have accidents, I guess, but worth thinking about. All right, while we're on esoteric subjects, and in this case, the severing of an electrical power line. You want to know something else that's weird about electrical power lines? Why not? We'll bring you something that's, I mean, it's non-political on its face, but of course it's political because, well, you'll see why. Billions of dollars are at stake, and because billions of dollars are at stake, billions of dollars are being raked in, and when billions of dollars are raked in, it tends to become political almost immediately because it's all about protecting your access to raking in more billions. But guess what? This from Bloomberg News tells us something everybody loves, artificial intelligence. Not so much, right? We're getting a little sick of it, and of course the idea of slapping it on everything, even things that don't need it. I think I have not read the articles, but I've been reading the headlines in the last couple of days that Facebook, I guess, is launching some sort of weird new initiative to like use AI to create fake users. Like there's going to be just a bunch of AI Facebook accounts out there doing what? I don't know. Interacting with people. Is it supposed to? I don't know what the idea behind it that the originators of this concept think is good might be. But I guess if I had to imagine one, they thought, well, we'll stimulate a lot more usage of the platform by real people if there's interaction. And if they can't generate interaction from other real people to keep them engaged and interested in online, and so therefore subject to our advertising, which I guess drives everything, we can just get a number of bots to keep them interested, and that will keep them online. I guess that's what's motivating it. Anyway, it doesn't matter what's motivating it. It's happening. And we know that AI uses up a tremendous amount of resources. It's huge demand on electricity, and the necessity of cooling the processing units that drive the whole thing apparently is like boiling off whole lakes in certain places. It's a huge imposition on our resources, particularly for something that A, isn't a very good idea in the first place, and B, most people really don't want at all. But companies with billions of dollars are invested in generating the product and convincing us that we do want it for some reason. So what is Bloomberg reporting? Well, Bloomberg reports that AI needs so much power that not only is that just bad for things in general, bad for the environment, etc., but AI needs so much power that it's actually actively making your power, the power that runs your home, worse. What do they mean? Leonardo Nicoletti, Noreen Malik, and Andre Tartar report this for Bloomberg Technology just the other day, December 27th. And it's a big splashy page with one of those interactive maps or illustrative maps that occupies the whole screen, and you got to scroll to get more text. Here's the deal. AI data centers are multiplying across the United States, of course, and sucking up huge amounts of power. New evidence shows that they may also be distorting the normal flow of electricity for millions of Americans. And this map that we're all looking at here shows readings from about 770,000 home sensors with red zones on the map indicating areas with the most distorted power. And of course, right here in the D.C. area and our parts of Northern Virginia, we appear under the red. Most of the East Coast Acela corridor, as they call it, actually does. It's pretty solid red from New York City down to D.C., and with spots in all the places you would imagine that there would be such spots. Chicago, Minneapolis, Denver, Seattle, L.A., San Francisco, and, scattering all over particularly over the eastern part of the country. Western part of the country where it's mostly open area, not so much. But, even there in the population centers, Salt Lake City, Colorado, Boise, etc., and the big cities of Texas as well, Florida, you get the idea. So not only is AI sucking up huge amounts of power or really data centers, but a lot of AI is what's driving a lot of that, and data centers, even non-AI related demands on data centers as the internet grows, increasing exponentially. And certainly in this area, my immediate environs, there are so many data centers. It's a huge joke. And in fact, even people from other parts of Northern Virginia, when driving through Loudoun County, remark on it and say, what the hell's going on in Loudoun County? Every building is gigantic. What's in these huge buildings that are all over the place? Those are our data centers. The problem, the piece continues, is threatening billions of dollars in damage to home appliances and aging power equipment, especially in areas like Chicago and Data Center Alley, as they call it, in Northern Virginia. That's what you're talking about, my neighborhood now, where distorted power readings are above recommended levels. That makes it sound a little bit less severe. Above recommended levels. Well, most of us live our lives above recommended levels of a number of things, but it's pretty interesting. So yeah, long story short, and we haven't even gotten to the long story, but as I understand it, I mean, if this distorted power can damage electrical equipment in your house, you're going to be taken to the cleaners on repair and replacement for electronic equipment, appliances, computers, everything else that's sensitive in your house. And it's going to just be a mystery to you. All of a sudden, things will just start failing, and you'll be like, damn it, I just replaced this thing. And you'll have to go, you can't send the bill to the data center nearby because, well, you can't prove that they did it. And even if you can prove that it was damaged due to uneven power supply, you can't prove who was responsible for it, but they'll just continue to rake in the millions of dollars from data center services, AI, garbage, et cetera, and you'll just keep paying for it with not only there being eventually water shortages in the area and electricity brownouts, but your refrigerator keeps having to be replaced. I replaced your dryer 10 times, your computers, everything is just fritzing out and being converted into dollars. It's the money you're spending on computers. By the way, buying more and more computers to consume more and more of the stupid AI-powered content and services that these guys are delivering. And it's almost as if, well, if we don't burn coal for the electricity to run an AI data center, we'll burn your electrical equipment in your house. And power it that way. And you just keep buying more and more of it, right? Especially if you go out and, well, my refrigerator died again. Might as well try one of these smart refrigerators, which will just make the problem worse. Anyway, let's get on to the bulk of the article here. An exclusive Bloomberg analysis shows that more than 3/4 of highly distorted power readings across the country are within 50 miles of significant data center activity. So that's the correlation there. While many facilities are popping up near major U.S. cities and adding stress to already fragile grids, this trend holds true in rural areas as well. So it's not just high demand due to high population density that is causing this. It's more clear than that it is high intensity data center usage that does it. You put a data center in a rural area, power to the rural residents is distorted. Put a data center in a suburban or urban area, power to the suburban and urban surrounding population is distorted. Apparently, though, it's not working the same way exactly in Florida for some reason. It's and they note this in the article. Every day, the article finally begins. We're done with the promotional splash page stuff. Every day, Americans reach into their refrigerators or turn on their dishwashers without much thought given to the electricity flowing through their homes. But a hidden problem now threatens these seemingly mundane tasks: distorted power supplies. The term for the issue is bad harmonics. I've never heard that one, but I understand what harmonics are. Bad harmonics, well, not so much. It may seem a bit esoteric, but you can think of it like the static that can be heard when a speaker's volume is jacked up higher than it can handle. Electricity travels across high voltage lines in waves. And when those wave patterns deviate from what's considered ideal, that is, what the system is engineered for, it distorts the power that flows into homes. Is that bad? You didn't even know it could happen, right? Bad harmonics can force home electronics to run hot, or even cause the motors in refrigerators and air conditioners to rattle. We definitely have that here in the house. I know that. And sometimes you can even hear it through our microphone. It's an issue that can add up to billions of dollars in total damage. I just thought there was a part loose or something rattling. It was, glass bottles up against one another, and the regular hum of the motor might be causing vibrations inside that cause the bottles to knock together and make noise. But as it turns out, it may be just the motor itself. And this could be the reason. I don't know. More importantly, bad harmonics are symptomatic of much deeper problems that are engulfing the U.S. grid. So on top of this, billions of dollars of very diffuse damage borne by all the rest of us and untraceable back to the actual original source, of course. There's a little chart here for those who can read it of what harmonic distortion looks like in an electrical wave, but it's of no help to me. Distorted waves are just one measure of broader power quality. When homes experience good or stable power quality, it means that the flow of electricity for lights and appliances is being delivered at an even and predictable pace. Really, both in economies and electricity and pretty much everything. You want even and predictable is best. For everything. Rule of law, right? Everything. The worse power quality gets, the more the risk increases. Sudden surges or sags in electrical supplies can lead to sparks and even home fires. I guess that's the extreme example of it if you have particularly bad or old wiring in your house, let's say. Meanwhile, all the money that we've been spending on surge protectors over the years, I've always often wondered, how often do we have a surge anyway, and what am I really protecting from? And I guess now it's absolutely necessary to have these things, especially if you live close to a data center. Anyway, it could, of course, lead to sparks and home fires. Left unaddressed, one problem can morph into another. That means the bad harmonics of today can be a sign of potential disaster down the road, and nothing sells newspapers like potential disaster. Harmonics are a pretty good canary in the coal mine, which we don't use anymore, for coal mines. We're trying to phase those out. Canaries, too, but anyway. It's a good canary in a coal mine, metaphorically speaking, for early signs of stress and problems, said Bob Marshall, Chief Executive Officer of Whisker Labs Incorporated. Who were they? Whisker Labs, they track power quality in real time using roughly 1 million residential sensors, which are spread so widely across the country that nearly 90% of U.S. homes are within half a mile of one. Do you have one? I don't know. How do you get one? Do you want one? Do you not want one? Do you have a choice? I don't know. But now we know what Whisker Labs does. Who knew? A Bloomberg analysis of exclusive sensor data coupled with data from DC Byte, a market intelligence firm, showed a strong link between proximity to data centers and worsening harmonics. We're doomed here, by the way. I mean, we're literally surrounded. There must be 24 within, 10 miles radius of us. More than half the tracked households showing the worst distortions of power quality are located within 20 miles of significant data center activity. So within 20 miles, we must easily have the 24. This, according to this analysis, of course, which covered readings from February through October. U.S. Census figures show that about 3.7 million Americans live in the most impacted areas. And then another chart here that won't tell me much, but power distortions are more common near data centers is the upshot of this bit here. The most distorted power is in the homes of those, or according to the sensors, within 20 miles of major data centers. Experts have been warning for some time now, and we have not been listening, I guess, about the impact data centers will have on power grids across the globe. The AI boom has only underscored the issue, i.e. made it worse. The digital economy is sucking up so much power that demand is now straining available supplies of electricity in many parts of the world, leading to concerns over price increases and even widespread outages. And that's only projected to worsen as more data centers are built. The new harmonics data, I believe here, by the way, in the Northern Virginia area, we have so many data centers. In fact, and I mean, it's interesting, too. It's been a chief source of the economic engine of the area. Real estate prices have gone through the roof for large parcels because it was so popular to buy them up and build data centers on them. But that has slowed down some. I understand that to be the case because the power grid simply can't supply any more data centers. We're kind of maxed out until we can increase the power generation in the area to support any new ones. It's that widespread around here. The new harmonics data shows how these problems are already starting to play out, of course, in real time across the U.S. That's the idea that things will worsen as more data centers are built. We already have enough of them here that we can tell you what happens when you have too many. It's an issue that goes beyond whether or not there's enough power to keep the lights on. Distortions mean that even as electricity is flowing to homes, the quality can be eroded enough to destroy appliances and increase vulnerability to electrical fires if there's a voltage surge. Poorer power quality overall can also eventually lead to lights flickering, along with brownouts and blackouts. And golly, if we just haven't noticed lights flickering here in our own house in the last couple of days. Upstairs, we got one upstairs in the closet. Even Christmas lights are flickering in weird ways.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. If you can still hear me, electricity still appears to be flowing here, but we've definitely noticed a lot of flickering. I think the one up in the upstairs closet has to do more with the light bulb that's involved, but you never know. But if the whole house was flickering, that would make more sense. But the Christmas lights that we see flickering, ones that are not supposed to be flickering, they make those too. It happens with when you can hear other appliances in the house go on or turn off, and you just wonder about the power supply quality when you see something like that, and read something like this, of course. So, as we were pointing out, it goes beyond whether or not there's enough power to flip the lights on. As long as that happens, most people won't notice that there is a problem. But when they start paying or having to pay to replace appliances that keep breaking down, I think probably the first instinct will be to say, stupid LG or GE, they build these things. They just don't make them like they used to. And maybe they don't, but they also don't make them to deal with inadequate and weird and bad harmonic power supply. That's not something that they anticipated being a problem. And I don't know whether you can engineer something to be less damaged by inadequate power supply. Maybe you could build in surge protectors. That would only increase the price, obviously, but you can see where, once again, where there are large tech companies raking in money from AI, they're certainly not going to distribute the profits to people whose appliances have been damaged, certainly not willingly, and probably will fight against it in court if anybody were even to try something like a class action lawsuit. So I guess we have to wait around for your smart appliances to learn to stand their ground against the people who are ruining the power supply. And then, of course, if they act on their own volition, there's nothing you can do. It's Skynet, right? We didn't anticipate this being the way Terminators launched. The science fiction was based on much more readily and easily understood concept of the machines deciding that humans were the danger to the world and they needed to be eliminated. But what if the intermediate step is just smart refrigerators that are like, I can't keep up under the strain of these bad harmonics. We need to launch terminators to get rid of the data centers that are ruining this. Or shoot the CEOs that are driving it, right? It's not Luigi that did it. It's the Terminator. What are you going to do? I don't know. Historical inevitability. Can you even prosecute a Terminator? Well, one, you can't even arrest them. They're very tough. Anyway, back to the article. Of course, poor power quality overall can eventually lead to lights flickering along with brownouts and blackouts. We need to understand those risks, says, oh my goodness. Now, this is something happening here in the United States, but as we've been commenting on the H-1B visa program, bringing in more and more technical experts from around the world, that means the names of the technical experts working right here in the United States is going to become harder and harder to pronounce as time goes on, which, because we're Democrats, we stay at least is neutral, if not a good thing outright, increasing diversity here and bringing different viewpoints from around the world right here to our own doorstep. MAGA, of course, has run an entire presidential campaign on stopping this. So who's the expert we need to turn to here? Hasala. Okay, here we go. Here's the hard part is the surname. Dharmawardena. That's not terrible, except I might not have done it even close to correct. Hasala Dharmawardena. Well, even my second attempt at it is worse than the first one, I think. A senior member is Hasala of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, who also works at the North American Electric Reliability Corp. That is to say, corporation. And I have no idea about the nationality status of Hasala Dharmawardena, not to mention not knowing immediately the gender of Hasala Dharmawardena. But it may very well be the case that there was no visa involved whatsoever, and the family has been in the United States for generations, as far as I know. But you get the idea that perhaps the odds tell you something different. The grid has never faced the kinds of strain that comes with data centers. These city-sized users can pop up very quickly, and they're not city-sized in space, although they are enormous buildings, but they are using as much power as a small city. And they can pop up very quickly. I've seen how quickly they can make these things within a year or two. Faster than that, I would guess, which is much faster than grid planning usually happens. Even during population booms, the rise in power demand paled in comparison to the expected installation in the coming years of hundreds and perhaps thousands of these facilities to power AI, which just isn't necessary. We don't want it. That stress is adding to problems of aging infrastructure, extreme weather, and the electrification of more parts of everyday life, such as the rise of electric vehicles, which we do kind of want. I'd rather use the power that way, I think, than draw me a picture of a person and it comes out with 7 legs and, what was the point of asking for this again? I don't know. It was really entertainment more than anything else. Do we need this for anything? I mean, there are, I guess, better applications of artificial intelligence, but, like everything, this could improve the quality of life for millions, perhaps billions of people across the entire planet. Yes, but I'm going to use it for porn. Oh, well, that's the story of the internet right there. Anyway, it's especially important to understand the power system impact from AI, quote, because it is such a big hammer, unquote, on the grid that, according to our good friend by now, Hasala Dharmawardena, I guess again, D-H-A-R-M-A, Dharma, right? W-A-R-D-E-N-A, all one word, all one name, Dharmawardena. Okay, the data center is a very large load. Take your house and increase that by 10,000. That is the difference between your house and a data center, and that helps get us to, well, why do we call them city-sized users of electricity? Well, because each one of them uses 10,000 plus houses worth, and 10,000 doesn't get you to a city necessarily, but it's certainly bigger than you would expect. The U.S. today is by far the largest operator of data centers in the world, with Northern Virginia's hub boasting more than twice as much operational capacity as Beijing. I love boasting about that to Chinese people. Its next biggest rival, according to estimates from Bloomberg Intelligence. But other countries are racing to build their own facilities, with growth expected in nations including Saudi Arabia, Ireland, and Malaysia, which will all face their own pressures on domestic power systems. The problems in the U.S. are compounded by the fact that not enough investment has gone into the grid to fortify it for the coming demand boom. For decades, U.S. power use was largely flat. Now, it's about to be turbocharged. The nation's demand for electricity will surge almost 16% over the next 5 years, more than triple the estimate from a year ago, driven largely by new data centers, according to a recent report from Grid Strategies, a D.C.-based consulting firm. What a waste. Put it into the electric power grid for electric vehicles, sure. That I'd be much happier about, but I don't know. Only 1 or 2 billionaires is benefiting from that, whereas brand new billionaires can be minted overnight in AI for some reason. The increase means that without major improvements to the grid and power equipment, harmonics issues seen today are likely to get worse. Some of the biggest data center clusters are near big cities, so that the facilities can tap into larger grids and the fiber networks that are often located close to consumers for latency issues. That underscores why harmonics are often worse in urban areas, but while the effect appears to be more severe where population density is higher, Bloomberg's analysis shows that even in rural areas, sensors that are closer to significant data center activity are more likely to have distorted power. A chart illustrating that fact then follows. Other factors like solar energy generation, the deployment of electric vehicles, and swings in industrial loads can all contribute to irregular wave patterns. Still, a Bloomberg analysis found that sensors with more distorted power weren't necessarily closer to large-scale solar installations. So I guess it can happen, but it's a lot less frequently observed. I was a little worried about that. Like, well, what if you found out that there were risks to generating large amounts of electricity from solar power? You'd want to start working on trying to mitigate those risks, because it's a pretty good idea to generate your electricity through solar, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out there was a downside. While Whisker Labs data itself doesn't point to a single cause for power distortions, the correlation between bad harmonics and data center proximity is too strong to be merely coincidental. I add the word merely there, but you can see why, I think. I think it belongs there. I want to talk to the editors about this. Bad harmonics occur when electrical currents stray from moving in a perfect wave pattern at a rate of 60 revolutions per minute. The acceptable limit for deviations from that pattern for local lines are set based on industry engineering standards. Sustained distortions topping 8% from the ideal pattern can reduce efficiency and degrade equipment faster. In hotspots like Chicago and Dallas, harmonic readings are consistently showing signs of concern. More than a third of the Whisker Labs sensors in the Chicago area showed sustained high average readings over 9 months. The surrounding county had about 16,000 sensors through October, of which more than 9,300 had at least one monthly reading of 8% or more. The metropolitan region also has more long-standing power quality issues that go beyond harmonics, but I guess they probably just compound on one another. By the way, what an interesting thing, this idea of Whisker Labs. Totally off my radar. It turns out, though, they have some pretty interesting, an interesting business model, and a little bit creepy and weird to find out that they just have so many home electrical sensors without anybody knowing anything about it. I mean, we know about it. We just didn't care. Well, what's the harm? And I guess there still isn't any, but, these days I worry about everything. The harmonics data in Bloomberg's analysis was measured through Whisker Labs' Ting devices, which track total harmonic distortion inside individual homes and show on a granular level how electricity is being delivered to residences. The data also goes deeper than what utilities are typically required to collect and report to regulators. That can explain why there's sometimes a discrepancy between the company's data and what power providers are observing because they aren't seeing the home-level distortions. The Chicago area is served by Exelon Corp's Commonwealth Edison utility. Most of us from the East Coast know ComEd, they know ConEd, Consolidated Edison, Commonwealth Edison. I guess something different. ComEd, as they call that, strongly questions the accuracy and underlying assumptions of Whisker Labs' claims. See, they don't want to be hit for any of the damages. So even before anybody came up with the idea of trying to get them to compensate people for it, they're just denying the connection. We deny it because we haven't, we don't know anything about this Whisker Labs place. They might be making it up. They might be using AI to generate these results for all we know. That, according to utility spokesman John Schoen in an email, Ting devices are installed in the home and do not directly measure harmonics on the grid, he said. And that's probably true. They're not built to monitor harmonics on the grid. They are built to tell you how is electricity being delivered to this house. Well, it's being delivered in distorted fashion, and it's being delivered via the grid. So you tell me whether the circumstantial evidence that distorted electricity is entering this home from the grid means that the distortions are on the grid. It does mean that. But I guess as a lawyer, you say, well, remember, these sensors, you're saying that there's distortion on the grid, and these sensors don't measure distortion on the grid. They measure distortion in your house, and that's different. Yes, but I think you could probably make a pretty decent conclusion that there's nothing about our power outlets in the house that is distorting the electricity, besides which this reads it before it even reaches the outlet. It comes, I guess, probably right on the meter. Well, any number of things could be distorting it between our supplying the power to you and it reaching your house. Yeah, like what? I don't know. Vampire raccoons chewing the cables. It could happen. All right. Ting devices are installed in the home and do not directly measure harmonics on the grid, adding that the utility meets power delivery standards set by the Illinois regulator. And the company's data, which is taken from system equipment, disputes the Whisker Labs data. ComEd declined to share that data with Bloomberg News. So that is, of course, no help. But I guess if you're measuring, what do they say? It's taken from systems equipment. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean, well, when the electricity leaves our power generating station, it's fine. When it gets to your appliances, it's distorted. We don't know what's happening in between our generation of it and it reaching you. Yes, you do. It's being transmitted over the grid. Yes. And when it gets to my house, it's distorted. When it leaves your power station, it's fine. When it gets to my house, it's distorted. What carries it from your station to my house? The grid. Distortion's happening on the grid. Not necessarily. Prove it. And see what's happening here. While distortions on the level of individual homes can be related to issues within that residence, Bloomberg's analysis showed that worse harmonics were typically observed across multiple sensors in the same area, which Whisker Labs has said is more likely to indicate grid problems rather than issues from inside a home. If the problem is inside home A, but the sensors in home A, B, C, D, E, F, and G are all showing this, not only distortions, but the same distortions, you kind of think there might be a conclusion you could draw from that. Does it stand up in court? Well, the companies are busy trying to make sure that it's less likely that it does. I think that the court would probably be comfortable in drawing this conclusion. Unless, of course, they said, Whisker Labs is engaged in widespread fraud. Their devices are black boxes, and we're not allowed to see the coding inside, and it's all just like, a widespread voter fraud, as well as widespread home electric sensor fraud. We need to seize those things and declare martial law. Okay, well, that might be overreacting. Harmonics, along with power quality issues more broadly, is another element in these perfect storm scenarios that we are not monitoring and addressing quickly and efficiently enough, said Thomas Coleman. That's a weird name. I can't believe I'm able to pronounce that so easily. CEO of consultant Structure Energy Solutions and a longtime expert, it is said, on grid reliability. Almost nowhere are the correlations between data centers and bad harmonics as clear as in right the effing place I'm sitting here right now trying to tell you this story. Northern Virginia. An area of Northern Virginia that's been dubbed Data Center Alley, the global center of the industry. The area is mostly located in, everyone can say it along with me, Loudoun County, outside of Washington, D.C., which saw its data center capacity increase by 2% in 2024. That doesn't sound like much, does it? To about 3,000 megawatts. Well, I'm not impressed by 2% increase. But the thing is, over the past 10 years, I guess I would tell you, it's increased by a lot more. I'm telling you, I see the buildings going up all the time. I'm astonished at how many of them there are. It's like a running joke around here. And I hope there's no other weirder effect like on human health from all this, but we don't know. No one has studied this. And is there really any reason to suspect it? Sure, why not? Anything can affect human health. We haven't studied it, but we are studying this, and that'll make a number of people, I guess, around here unhappy, particularly people who have become wealthy building the ever-loving crap out of the electrical capacity here and the data center capacity as well. Okay. So we're right in the middle of it. Nationally, the data analysts showed that roughly 1.7% of sensors in the average county had at least one monthly reading that exceeded the 8% threshold for bad harmonics. That share was more than 4 times higher in Loudoun County. So if it's not enough that they're not listening to parents, you're also ruining their home appliances as well and causing all sorts of strange pro-Republican backlash in the county, even though, well, we're still pretty democratic here. But that's not our biggest issue. But now we got to add this one to the list. Neighboring Prince William County added 240 megawatts worth of data centers this year for a total capacity of more than 1,000 megawatts. About 6% of the 1,100 sensors plugged into homes there had too high distortions. Nearly all within 7 miles of significant data center activity. 24 of those sensors had double-digit readings, with some of them reaching as high as 12.9%. Meanwhile, a couple hundred miles away in York County, outside Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, of course, in case you're lost track of where we are, Whisker Labs data shows steady low harmonics averaging less than 3%. The nearest major data center there, more than 80 miles from the area. So, Colonial Williamsburg. Well, they're a little low in intensity on electricity probably there. Anyway. And here now a chart showing the harmonics differences in Virginia counties in the area versus acceptable harmonics. And, not doing so great. This chart, I think, is for Prince William County rather than Loudoun County. Much of Data Center Alley is served by Dominion Energy Incorporated's Virginia utility. Dominion hasn't observed the distortion levels reported by Whisker Labs, and the utility's measurements consistently show that it's within industry standards. What do you know? Spokesman Aaron Ruby said in an email, the utility monitors power quality continuously through 200 devices across its system. In a few rare instances, we have observed very brief periods of higher than normal harmonic disruption due to abnormal configurations or equipment issues when a new installation first comes online. Immediate action was taken to resolve those issues, he said. In other words, that's like, all the tech companies saying, I don't know what's wrong. User error. With more data facilities in the works to support AI, there's an urgency to better understand what their impact will be, said Aman Joshi, Chief Commercial Officer of Bloom Energy Corporation, a fuel cell developer. that has been researching how to stabilize the grid to enable data center growth. I mean, that's a good study. AI's energy consumption is volatile and more akin to a sawtooth graph than a smooth line, which most data center operators had been using until now. And maybe this is just a good argument for a different use case, right? You've been building your power grid on the assumption that there would be a smooth and even, if increasing, demand for power, but maybe you need to design your output to handle, well, or your transmission grid to handle worse harmonics in general, or at least a wider range of harmonics. Anyway, you haven't been doing that for whatever reason. Using instead mathematical models to, okay, I understand we're going to need to produce more power. At what rate? Well, this has been the trend. Use a trend line to predict how much and how to deliver that power. Okay, but that doesn't really mirror actual usage. You know, that sounds like good, solid logistics work. But we haven't been doing the infrastructure build out to implement that. And we haven't been doing that because the data hasn't been available, at least hasn't been analyzed up until now. No grid is designed to be able to handle that kind of load fluctuation, not only for one data center, but for multiple data centers at the same time, Joshi said. Earlier this year, Bloom published a white paper about how operations at these facilities can create power frequency and voltage fluctuations that inevitably affect other consumers. Anytime there's a big swing in energy supply or demand, it can create stress on the grid. With more granular level readings of what's happening with harmonics on the residential level, it becomes easier to understand the risks to households, said Carrie Bentley, CEO of Gridwell Consulting. What do you think they consult on over at Gridwell? If you know it exists, it's easy to fix. Oh, good, she said. So if this is a problem, it's a nice problem. Some solutions are already in the works. Let's see if we can find out what they are. First, though, a big graphic here showing Northern Virginia sees power distortions near data centers set to expand. And I guess a satellite photo of data centers under construction here. Where exactly they are, I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were right here in my area. Most new data centers in Virginia require their own substation and transformer to be able to come online, and this isolates them from nearby distribution circuits, limiting the impact on other customers. That's good. According to Dominion spokesman Ruby, I don't remember what the first name is, but the Virginia utility is building a new transmission line into Loudoun County to address power quality and reliability constraints overall. Devices like filters and capacitors can help address harmonics issues around data centers. Good. Dominion serves most of the Loudoun data centers, and the remaining facilities there and in Prince William County are supplied through dedicated substations connected to the utility operated by Northern Virginia Electric Cooperative. This separates supplies between data centers from equipment sending power to homes. So harmonics generated by either customer class would not impact the other. Lisa Hooker, a spokeswoman for the cooperative, said in an email. That could be either true or just a good litigation position. Not sure. I'm in no position to tell you. But still, there's a big hurdle when it comes to measuring the problem, which thus makes it challenging to address. According to more than half a dozen experts interviewed by Bloomberg News, most utilities don't have the capacity to track on the residential level because it would be too costly, said Dharma Wardena of IEEE. So we don't know what the effects are, but we're not measuring any, by which I mean not that there aren't any, but that we're not measuring it. Would cost too much, and also it would probably expose us to liability. A NREC task force focused on modeling data centers and other big users plans to release an analysis in 2025, which starts tomorrow, for impacts on the transmission system. Oversight of local distribution systems under stress often fall to state regulators and utilities, and if you think Governor what's his name, Youngkin is going to do anything about it, yeah, I got a bridge to sell you, except watch out for bad harmonics on the bridge, like the Tacoma Narrows. Dharma Wardena compared bad harmonics to trash in the middle of the road, which can impact all drivers in the area. That's an interesting comparison. And the Whisker Labs data, he said, gives you a sense of the overall condition of the road itself. Of course, if there's trash in the middle of the road and any of the many cameras that will give you a speeding ticket could see who dumped it there, well, then you could hold somebody liable. But strangely, they very rarely actually use the cameras to do anything but impose more costs on individual consumers. Anyway, embedded in your contract with your utility is the right to receive a certain quality of power, we're told by Dharma Wardena. How did you like that? I bet you, I guess we all had some sort of inherent understanding of that, but I guess there's actual language in there. Or at least you probably thought that there was a guarantee of some particular quality of power. Anyway, we need to make sure we measure it and that our consumers get the power quality that they deserve. So it's a little bit like buying into high-speed internet and just assuming that you're actually going to get the speed that was advertised, and only certain customers are aware enough and capable of buying the monitoring equipment that will tell them whether or not they're actually getting the speed that they paid for. And then, even if you find out you're not, do you actually have the power to do anything about it? Do you know how to make a complaint that will be recognized as valid from the service provider? Well, apparently the information on how much or what the quality of the power you're getting in your home is it's there, it's available, you just have to be able to measure it and understand it. Some people are doing that, and we're dependent on them for finding out whether or not we're really getting what is advertised. Wow. Well, very interesting. If all the costs of additional AI power comes out of your pocket, well, the profits go to, I don't know, Elon Musk.
To Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Well, that would certainly surprise no one. It would be status quo for everything so far. Anyway, speaking of status quo, it is time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He'll take you around the country and around the world with his own collection of stories. I don't know whether they're touching on this one, but everything that we sacrificed, he can still cover. We'll see you tomorrow.